Yeah, so we're very privileged to have Ash from Windrush against sewage pollution, who are, it's a terrible expression, but market leaders in this. They've been doing this for longer than anybody else in the country, I think. And what I said when I met him earlier this evening, their time has come. You know, they're hitting their head against a brick wall, and now they're finding that their message is being received loud and clear. And I would say, as a planner, there are different estimates of this, but there are about 100,000 houses not being built currently because of nutrients in streams. So water pollution is becoming a major economic hurdle, and the government don't like it. And Ash might also have his ear to that ground. They might have to feel they have to relax standards to enable houses to be built. And hopefully the regulations are going to be strong enough to prioritise the water quality. But it is a major issue now. So if I can let Ash explain what WASP has been and now is, and he says it'll take 30-40 minutes and leave time for questions. So over to you, Ash.
Yeah, excellent. Right, nice to see everybody. Now, I don't really know what you want. I'm told that I should talk to you about the various ways to judge water quality and to apply a bit of sense to working out what's good and bad in your area and how to perhaps use that material then to make a change. But just picking up on that last comment there, Daniel, about planning, I've got a couple of slides at the back of the presentation that I hived off just in case. If you want me to talk about how we use planning law to get Grampian conditions, I can do that. If planning is of interest to people, I'll bring it in. You know, I'll chop something out.
We'll leave that to the end. See how we get on.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to share a presentation. There's some video on it. There won't be any sound, I don't think, coming through, but that's because it's just the sound of my camera rummaging around underwater mainly. And we'll take it from here. Right, can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay, marvelous. So yeah, I titled it "Lifting the Lid," and then I thought I'd amuse myself by saying not putting it down again, which is one of those contentious things with toilets, which takes us to where we're going with sewage talk. WASP, Windrush Against Sewage Pollution. We are pan-political. We engage with anybody within reason. And there's generally cross-party support to what we're doing, although there are some quite contentious things around the voting that happened that kept sewage pollution profitable, but we won't go there for now. Our aims are to end untreated sewage, to improve the effluent standards that come out 24/7. You get a liquid passing out of a sewage works, and it's described as cleaned water. Well, I can tell you, I'll show you some pictures of some of that clean water, and you can make up your mind how clean that is. And to make our rivers safe for all. So we're not bustingly concentrating on making this safe for people, because we think you could just put bleach in it and chlorine and kill everything. But we want our rivers to be safe for all ecology, from the mayfly to the person who wants to swim around in it. And how do we do that? We do that through investigation. That's where our strength has lay. Through communication and education, through the media principally, and talks like this, various other things, social media, and through engagement with councils, government, water companies, regulators, etc., etc. We're also using the law, because sometimes you just can't get people's attention without resorting to the law. We're a registered charity, and that's our website, windrushwasp.org, which is quite a nice site as a point of reference for you. So let's just set this off. This is what a river should look like. We know what we've become accustomed to, but I'm going to show you an ordinary limestone stream. It's the Shilbrook. It's come out of somewhere called Cynet, not far from Lechlade. It's come down through farmland, you know, the thing that's meant to be polluting everything. And it's come down through past Carterton, and it's got to just above Carterton Sewage Works, and it looks like this. I'll show you a little film of it, and then you'll see the the scene as it develops down past this big input of mainly treated effluent, but also untreated sewage at times. You've always got this lovely little family of native brown trout, and this is what you get. Once you're down past the sewage works, you've got this degradation going on down past Carterton, then past Bampton sewage treatment works. That's a plant, by the way. And you come down to a scene like that below Bampton sewage works. And this is also kind of a summary of how regulation works, because the Environment Agency accepted the water company's explanation that that foam was a natural product, which is quite ridiculous, because all we did was put a piece of plastic pipe floating below the sewage outfall and one above the sewage outfall, and no foam gathered in the one above the outfall, and orange foam gathered in the one below. But that was beyond the capability of the environmental regulator, and that is the battle that we're constantly coming up against. And the other way to see the difference between good and bad is to go back in time. And in this case, we go back to 1998 in a rare piece of video. It's really hard to get these things. If you've got any old video, even if you think it's on a bit of old film stuck up in your loft or something, and it's of a river in a good state, do drag it out and send it to us, and we'll get it converted, and we'll send you a copy and give you your old thing back. Because this is so valuable. This was done for an angling club by a man called Paul Woodley, and it's so lucky he did it, because up until we had this, the Environment Agency was telling us that these old boys were just making this up, really. They were looking back in rose-tinted spectacles at the past, and this is what the river looked like at Witney in May 1998. That is clear. I thought the colour was wrong, because you've got a lovely clear golden gravel bed. You've got roach. There's a big shoal of barbel there. The film quality is not great because it's an old video, but those are big barbel, maybe up to about 8 pounds. And that's the same place in May 2022. It's exactly the same location. That is what has happened. And there's a great deal of denial over that. So what are we going to talk about tonight? We're going to talk about sewage pollution overview. I'll just give you a kind of a quick run through it, and then the tools that you can use, including the Freedom of Information Act, Environmental Information Regulations, Google Earth is a good one, the Catchment Explorer, which is an Environment Agency resource, Thames Water Event Duration Monitoring Map, local intelligence that you can get, photography, and the water quality testing that some of you will be familiar with. But it's all meaningless without something, and I won't spoil what that is. And what's at stake? Our rivers are in a mess. Only 14% of rivers in England and Wales are in good ecological status. I doubt that it's that high. In the Thames region, it's actually between 3 and 6%, and we're not going to argue whether it's 3 or 6%, because that is such a pathetically low number. And that is the future. That is the present and the future for young people, like the children in the picture, because they've never seen a clean river, many of them, and they may never see one if we don't get our acts together. However, you've got preying on that water another interest, and that is the water industry. And while they dress it up with chief executives that know how to say the right things, Sarah Bentley was a recent chief executive of Thames Water, who we spoke to and met a few times. She was heartbroken about the impact of sewage spills, but she was still taking £12 million for 3 years' work. And then when it got a bit difficult at the beginning of this year, and Thames Water got into financial difficulty, and it looked like they might go under, she just left, took the bonus and went. So all the passion for the environment, when it came down to it, just evaporated. The water company was making a huge amount of money first half of the year, and has been doing a lot of moving of money around, basically to keep the dividend tap open. And as we said, she was blessed with quite a significant set of bonuses, including over £3 million golden hello for running a monopoly company. Now, this is obscene. This doesn't have to happen. Doesn't happen in other sectors. water companies have got this grip, ridiculous grip on dividends and bonuses, and they do not put anything in. The story about the money is a whole different talk, which I could do, and I do from time to time, but it is absolutely exploitative. The shareholders are merely functioning as parasites. Whatever your politics are, this is such a shockingly bad deal. It does really qualify for the term, it's a scam. And one of the worst is the chief executive, Severn Trent, who got nearly £4 million in, I think, 2022, for running a company that is, the customers cannot leave. I mean, how difficult is this? But she's been very good at getting the 4-star status of that company, which meant the company can charge more money by not disclosing data. One of the most secretive companies of all, that won't give us the data that we've used to expose the illegality of the others. Severn Trent, United Utilities were doing a lot of that as well. So our rivers are effectively being using as a dumping ground, like for tertiary treatment. So they might call it a nature-based solution, but they're pouring it into a river. By the time it gets to the end of that river, a lot of the work in terms of biological oxygen demand and the general improvement through bacterial action and settling out of solids has happened in these smaller rivers, which is why the Thames is actually in not too bad a state, because most of the damage along the Thames Valley gets done to the tributaries like the Windrush, which have gone battered, the Och, the Evenlode, the Ray, the Colne, the list goes on and on. All of them have faced that same sort of decline and show the same signs of damage. So what are sewage outfalls? You'll find them in various places, and they come in various forms. This is one from a land treatment area, so-called. This is an untreated outfall at Bourton on the Water, where we had sewage fungus in the Windrush. It was flowing so much. And this is caused, you will hear people like our own MP from our area, Robert Court, saying this is done to stop your house flooding with sewage. And it's the Victorian infrastructure and whatever. So we recently did an article with Jill Plymouth from the Financial Times to show that actually only 12% of the infrastructure is Victorian, and there's no suggestion that that's the bit that's not working. So that's rubbish. That's utter rubbish to imply that this is Victorian and they're trying to do something about a deep-seated problem. It's mainly post-war, and the investment happened mainly before privatization, and of course it's falling apart because it doesn't cure itself. So you have a sewers that take sewage to the sewage treatment works. When it rains, water can get in because some of these are combined sewers. Some people's rainwater goods off their roof will be connected to the sewer, or quite easily change things, but water companies have never done it. And so sometimes with heavy rain, it will get in through other ways, through surface water drainage. The water companies actually take it and charge for surface water drainage. So they'll fill the sewer up too much. They can't cope with it. It will pass over generally something like a weir, generally at the sewage works, sometimes en route in the sewage system, but often at the sewage works, and then it will go into the river. Mostly in this area screened for the worst stuff, as in the visible things, but not always, as in visible, as in wet wipes and such like. And it will then pour out untreated, but diluted. Should be diluted to at least 3 times the normal dilution of it. That doesn't always happen for various reasons. So that's the reason for it. Now, the other reason it happens is due to groundwater infiltration. The groundwater rises mainly in winter in this area, and as it rises above the pipes, the hydraulic pressure increases, forces its way in through cracks, holes, and whatever in either badly put together or badly maintained sewers. And you see a picture of that actually happening on the right-hand side. So that causes a long-term spill. Often that can go on for months. At Whitney, we had spilling for nearly, never mind this couple of hours illusion that we were being told about to stop anyone's house from flooding. This went on for 4 months, dumping untreated sewage into the Windrush, and 1.6 kilometers of sewage fungus in the Colwell Brook. Now that is actually illegal, but the water companies have got away with it for years, and they've built it into their business plan in yet another failure of regulation. absolutely illegal conduct. And so it's dumped in often in this way. On the left-hand side there, you've got the treated effluent coming out, but they can only treat so much and stay within their permit standards. So they need to be reducing the ammonia to a certain level, generally the biological oxygen and chemical oxygen demand to a certain level, and the suspended solids to a certain level. And to do that, they can only do so much. So to pass their permit, right next to it, they're dumping untreated sewage just here. So treated effluent, and that success is achieved by releasing untreated sewage there without a hint of irony. And that's not for short term, and it's done under their own monitoring. They monitor themselves, and they've become dependent on polluting illegally as a consequence. This is a sewage outfall at Witney, commonly running, and that can chuck out quite big volumes into the Windrush, with everything that comes with it, all of the chemicals, drugs, hormones, the kind of poo, pee, paper stuff that you would suspect would go in there. And it doesn't just miraculously disappear. That embeds itself in the river and then comes back, often in the form of foam and turbid water, sediment, and algal blooms during the summer. So it's a horror. And here's a different kind. This one, if you're looking on your area, that they don't all have that separated thing. This is treated effluent coming out at Fairford, but they blend it here. They mix in untreated sewage when that's spilling, which it is in this particular video, and that really kicks it out. It actually makes it into an aerosol, so anyone standing nearby is actually breathing that in, and that's what it looks like with the underwater camera where that's going in. That is all pouring into the lovely river column, a complete unpleasant toxic cocktail. And then you get signs like this one at Clanfield, where the various bits of debris were coming out and settling in the brook as well, in that very obvious display. And it's quite hard to hide that. This is at Woodstock. This is why the water companies don't like wet wipes, because they provide absolute profound evidence that they've been dumping untreated sewage, without which we would not have known that they'd been dumping untreated sewage at Woodstock. And we, in fact, we got the BBC out. BBC contacted them, and they said, no, we've had no sewage spills here, and we've sent our environmental consultants out. They can't find any evidence of any sewage debris in the trees. How do we find it? And I was with the reporter, and I said, well, just tell them to come to the sewage outfall and turn their head to the left, and they'll see it in the tree just downstream of the outfall. And then they said, yes, but you can't say that could have come from anywhere. That may not have been us. And I then pointed to a wet wipe hanging out of the pipe of the sewage works, at which point they finally put their hands up and said, okay, it last spilled in March or whatever it was. I mean, this is just ludicrous. And it's amazing how their consultants can't find stuff. That's their job, not finding things. So we use various types of science to forensically dissect this stuff. There's two of our volunteers. Well, you know, Soraya now works for Earth. Some of you know Soraya on the left works for Earthwatch, and Victoria's a non-practicing solicitor that works with us. And we've done various things to expose the nature of this business. I'm just going to run through a few of them. A lot of it was based on using the law, freedom of information law, and the environmental information regulations. Environmental information regulations applies to water companies because of a legal decision forced in by the legal group attached to the Angling Trust in about 2012, I think, without which we wouldn't be able to get this data. They would just tell us to go away, but they were forced into it, which was one of the biggest steps forward. And public bodies are subject to the Freedom of Information Act, which people probably know quite well. Interestingly enough, the Environment Agency has just been issued with an enforcement notice by the Information Commissioner for blatantly and routinely being late or not providing the information it's required to provide. And right now I'm dealing with one where I applied for information in April of this year. It should be provided within 20 working days, and they still haven't given it to me. And they sent me some files 30 days ago. Half of them would open, half of them wouldn't. And I said, send me the others, send them again. And they obviously something in those files they don't want me to see, because I still haven't got them, and that's being escalated. So you can't trust our regulators. That's the unfortunate thing about that. So we use that information. One of our team is a data analyst, Professor Peter Hammond. So when we were receiving huge volumes of data, this is what the industry did. It could send you hundreds of thousands or millions of lines of data. For me, that would be the end of that story. But for him, he was able to analyze that and find the needle in the haystack, and another needle, and another needle. And he used artificial intelligence to identify previous untreated sewage spills that were illegal. And we were able to take this to government at the time. The Environmental Audit Committee, House of Commons cross-party committee, was doing an inquiry. We took it to them. This is Peter Hammond explaining on Panorama, I think, when we did a Panorama episode, showing how he used shape analysis to identify the fingerprint of an untreated spill. We took that to the EAC inquiry, which quoted our data analysis as being better quality than that of the Environment Agency. And we even got DEFRA to write a blog specifically about WASP. So that revelation using the law and data was probably the thing that brought things really rapidly then into the news, because it went from campaigners talking about being unhappy to being able to point to blatant law breaking. And now we're working on exposing the actual rip-off involving the money and the investment that never was. The other thing that you might find, these are the easy things for people to use if you're starting to get interested in your own sewage works. This is Abingdon. Use Google Earth and the Google Earth Pro, and you get the historical imagery as well. So you can start to look back over the years and see how things have changed, if that's useful. And I think quite often it is. So you'll get two different images over various periods of time. It stayed the same for a long time, and you need to put them right next to each other, 2022 and 2003. You can see that those, where I've got the cursor now, you can see that those tanks were active at that point, and whatever that is was also active. There seems to be less of a sewage works there now in 2022, where these things have no longer got those revolving bars in them. It seems to be less of a works than there was in 2003, which is quite mysterious, but that's what it's telling us. Anyway, that's Abingdon. So you can start to learn a bit about that. And then you can use the Catchment Data Explorer if you want to. That's an Environment Agency resource, and it will show you then your wherever you want to look at the various breaking down of catchments on your area. So I took the OC here, which you were talking about, people were talking about looking at, and you can then dig into that. These are just screenshots, and you can see the classifications. It's regarded as ecologically poor, and it's poor because it gets a poor score on fish. Bizarrely, it gets a high score on invertebrates, and they've combined macrophytes and phytobenthos, which is a bit weird because phytobenthos has got algae and all sorts of crappy goo, which you'd normally think would be countering macrophytes, which are in stream and bankside plants, which they regard as good. So it is something of a lottery, this thing, but you can learn something from it, and you can also learn where the sources are attributed to by the water industry, by the Environment Agency. And you'll see the water industry featuring here, from sewage discharges and the phosphate impact being regarded as an issue. They'll also often mention farming, but they'll do it as often based on modelling or best guesses rather than any particular solid evidence. And you can't trust it. because when they don't want to downgrade a water course, like they don't want to downgrade the Windrush because we would make such a fuss about it in the media, you'll find this sort of thing happening. So on the left-hand side, these are the two same place. This is two photos from the same place. That's Burford in July 2010 at the top, full of weed, full of plant life, quite clear water, quite a rich environment. This is August in 2020 on the left, and it's devoid of all weed, basically. It's a shadow of its former self. It's grey water, and the fish life massively declined. On the right-hand side, that's Whitford, that's near where I live. 2009 photograph taken by my neighbour in exactly the same place, the photograph below it in 2017, and it's actually worse than that now. Now that's okay, but then this is the study of macrophytes, the plant life, by the Environment Agency, and you'll see that in 2009, it was in a moderate state, and in 2018, and this was actually worse than, as you can see, that continued past that time, was actually as like that or worse. They regarded that as actually slightly better, right on the verge of being good, when all the weed had died. And they did it by counting plants on the bank, I'm told. So quite a disingenuous thing to have done. Now, available to us now in the Thames region, with the first water company to do it, they have published a live map, and you can access this map by putting Thames Water live sewage discharge map or something like that in Google, and you'll get to it. And then you can drill down into this map. It's particularly well lit up here, as it was for much of the early part of the year. At the moment, it's mostly green, as in not spilling. But this will show you the sewage works that are spilling untreated sewage. They were required to do it by law, but they were the first to do it, to their credit. And we don't have any issues with Thames Water staff. We get on very well with a lot of them, and they all want the same thing, to do a decent job, but the money needs to go to them, not to the shareholders. I'm not even going to call them investors, shareholders. So and the grey ones are where the thing's not working. Likewise, there are people in the Environment Agency who try their very best to do a decent job. So I chopped out this yesterday or today or something, and this is Abingdon, and so nothing's spilling at the moment, but it did show that Abingdon had spilled on the 9th of May, the last time, for an hour for some reason. Don't know why. It was just an example of how to see that. But note there, if you want to look around at any of these others that are in your area, look for the improvement plan, and then you click on that, and you'll find this one, Abingdon. This is one of the vaguest I've actually seen. It's an upgrade planned, and it will improve its ability to treat the volumes. So these things are all out of date. They're all past their capacity. They let them go past their capacity because they know they can get away with it. But there's no money being attributed to that yet. Whereas many of these others, you will see huge and ridiculous sums of money attributed to doing very, very small upgrades. It's a different story. And then I talk about local intelligence, and this is where you talk to local parish councils or people on your travels when you're seeing a bit of evidence of pollution, and you think, well, there's no outfall here. How can this be? As I have done in the past, invariably you'll come across the reality, and there will be something. And in this case, it's a sporadically spilling manhole cover that just the hydraulic pressure builds up for whatever reason, a blockage, or it's just overwhelmed. And then you'll get untreated sewage pouring like this. It flips down that slope there, and that's into the River Windrush, which is a tiny river at that point. And these are very useful things to know about, because no one measures them, no one has any monitoring on them, and they can be an issue clearly. And then if you report them to the Environment Agency and the water company, they should do something about it eventually. And it's kind of down to us to do it. Now, I said I'd show you what photography, great thing. I use GoPro on a stick, 3-meter selfie pole, because I don't want to swim in this stuff. There's a guy up north called Mark Barrow who swims, and he posts a lot of video of sewage. But I'm frankly not going. I do dive, but I'm not going in that, because I know you could end up giving yourself a life-changing thing. And I don't particularly want it. I don't need to do it. So I stick a GoPro on a stick, and I recommend this thing, 300 quid for a GoPro. or so. We've got great mileage out of it. This is, we eventually found, very difficult to find, the outfall at Cassington Sewage Works, which treats about 20,000 people, people's sewage. And the outfall is about 2 kilometres from the works. So it's well hidden, out of sight. It's just above the Port Meadow bathing quality water at Oxford, which often tests high for bacteria. And this is descending with the GoPro on many days. You'll see it looking like this. Sorry, I clicked on the wrong thing. Here we go. Down we go. Take a deep breath, and now we're descending down to the pipe. It's about 3 meters down. Right. This is what they're calling treated sewage. You've got bits of paper coming through there. You see these things? These are pieces of undigested food. That's sweet corn. That's what's coming out of there. And on that day, I filmed it with German TV. You just saw something just flip out of the corner of that pipe. And I followed that up to the surface. And that was actually, this is me, my artistic photography. That is the sun behind a condom above Cassington Sewage Works for German television. Quite surreal. And we then talk about water quality sampling, and the reason being, as it says in this old Environment Agency slide, which they no longer will put up because it's too accurate, it will show you that the consequences of high nutrients, phosphate in this case, are cloudy water. So that's often what we see. The thing that they say, we don't know what's causing that cloudy water. Well, they used to know. It was phosphate and nitrate. Accumulated sediment, abundant algae, filamentous algae, and they're prone to overnight dissolved oxygen sags up and down, very high, very low, supersaturated, maybe 130, 150%, and down to 60%, something like that. Very low plant diversity, exactly what you've seen in those pictures before. And we use, for that, we quite often use the HANA checker, which is different than the Earthwatch one, because Earthwatch tests for phosphorus, actually, total phosphorus, not phosphate. We test for orthophosphate, and there's a conversion there. What we're doing will generally read about 3 times what the Earthwatch results show, because there's a conversion between those 2 factors. I'm going to show you this because this is a typical thing that you can measure. It's the River Avon at Tetbury. It's Wessex water, and it's because I'm really interested in the input of nitrate. But you'll see also how something happens that you see happening to your streams, happening very quickly and very convincingly due entirely to sewage works. So here we go. July 2022. So in we go above the sewage works. It's a small stream, and the GoPro goes in, and you'll see how clear it is. Very clear water, very little organic matter. That's quite high in phosphate there, actually, surprisingly high, which I think is very, very interesting. See that the gravel is not at all clogged. It's beautifully open and very good for spawning fish. This is the treated effluent outfall. I think it's about 6,000 people there. Nitrate from here was 100 milligrams per litre. Phosphate was about 3. Didn't make that much difference to the river in terms of phosphate, but it certainly did in terms of nitrate, made it much higher. You can see the effluent joining the water course. You can actually just see on the left-hand side there, you can just see a slight hint of greyness in that water as it blends in with the river water. But then downstream, immediately, as soon as that hits it, you've got this algal choking of filamentous algae and the clogging of the gravel. And you go further downstream, slightly slower water. Look how turbid the water is now. It's gone from clear to much more murky. You've got algae all over the bottom. That gravel is completely choked now. The invertebrate life and the fish that could have spawned in that cannot even get to it. It's completely coated in a mat of almost like moss. And I've used that in that same video in this slide. which I produced for the owners. Some areas that algae had even died off, and you've got that kind of black algae, and silt then remains where it's kind of decomposed. You've got this very fine silt, and that's the device that we use for monitoring nitrate at 30 in that case coming out of a spring. Few fish hanging on, sticklebacks, incredibly, they are like the Rocky of fish. Sylvester Stallone of fish. They'll survive in anything. Incredibly low oxygen tolerant fish. And this again was further up that stream where there wasn't any sewage. And this is ranunculus, beautiful plant, starting to go so low level, it's starting to grow out of the water. And again, nitrate not high, well, not high in these terms. And they're caddis there, case caddis, but bring it back down to where you've got the input little stickleback there from the sewage works, and you're back to that utter dismal state. So very interesting what you can show with the photography set against your monitoring. I think the photography is a very important factor in describing what you're finding. And I know some of you are also measuring turbidity, which we've also done.
5 minutes.
Yeah, turbidity, which we've done here down the Windrush. As you progressively made your way down, we ended up with that kind of situation right at the end. Again, an interesting thing for you to measure, and with the relevance of it, in that these are indicators of something that is actually stressing fish and causing then issues in their life cycle as it gets more and more turbid, carrying more suspended solids right up to the point of death. So you've got an excellent science data set ahead of you, but my question is, when you've got that, what are you going to do with it? Because if you haven't got a cunning plan, all you're going to do is have a nice story to tell, and you need to start, if you're going to make a difference, you need to have a plan of what you're going to do with that information and how you're going to force a change with it. So that comes down to questions, and if you want me to talk about planning, I've got a couple of slides on the back of this that I can show you. So far away, that, and by the way, that's the Ampney Brook. At left is above the sewage pollution sources, water mint, ranunculus, absolutely beautiful, and that is down Ampney, below the sewage sources, which is a river in a just a shocking state. So fire away.
Thanks very much. Can I just say that we've set up, I think it's currently 7 monitoring teams, and if everybody's been inspired by that talk to join one, then email me or Sally, because a team can be anything up from 2 people to 8. So all of us would like a bit of more help in what we're doing. We've got to measure the same position every month for 12 months. That's our commitment to Freshwater Watch. So questions for Ash? Hands up. I can't. Anybody wants to put a hand up? That's Dave. David.
Yeah, thanks for that presentation, Ash. It's really, I mean, shocking, of course, but really informative. I just a really quick question. If we are all successful with this, we manage, these discharges stopped happening, in the future, hopefully, would these rivers, presumably these rivers would recover, is the damage done reversible, and would that happen fairly quickly and successfully?
Yeah. I think here what you've got here is we've got quite fast flowing rivers, and the benefit of that being also in winter you add a few floods to that and you kind of give it a bit of a scrub. And we often see, even now, because we've pushed Thames water quite hard with the Windrush, we can get quite a good state of river hanging on a little bit longer in terms of weeks or even months in past the winter floods and the scouring that went on. Almost to the point of getting some of the weed coming back before it then starts to get algal blooms in it and gets covered in crap again. So yes, I do think it's quite a fast recovery, and in fact, it's been noted. I remember when I grew up on the fishing as a young boy on the Kennet and the Loddon as a kid, and the Loddon was pretty much the state of the Windrush when I was young in the 70s, and the Kennet was a thing of great clarity and beauty set alongside it. Sometime, I think in the 80s, they upgraded Basingstoke Sewage Works, and the Loddon suddenly mysteriously turned into the same clarity as the Kennet. But no one wants to go there with that story, and I can't wheedle that out of the Environment Agency or the water companies. But it happened. It was also happened in the past on the Windrush when they first upgraded Bourton on the Water sewage treatment works. So yes, I think you take clean water. Never mind the habitat; it can be in a bath and in a field, and leave that alone, clear with just a little bit of contact of fly life or the odd bird landing in it. And I've seen it in my own garden pond. Things just arrive and they start to thrive. But you can mess around with the environment and you can mess around with the habitat as much as you like, but as long as you're keeping polluted water in it, you're largely wasting your time. You're fighting against it. And that's why we kind of criticize the industry for funding habitat improvement, but continuing to pollute, because it's just really it's just distracting people and allowing them to continue what they're doing. Yeah, I think it would come back very quickly. And there's also little reservoirs. It's not like we've got no fish. There are fish hanging on. The numbers are much reduced, and the spawning habitat is poor. But you change that, suddenly, one fish spawning can be hundreds of thousands of fish. A successful spawning from a shoal could be massive, and to change the nature of that. And likewise with the invertebrate life, you get a few flies laying their eggs, dragonfly successfully breeding. It rapidly regenerates. It's beautiful.
Andy, is your hand up?
Oh no.
Has anybody got a question? Anne?
Are many fishermen part of WASP, or are fishermen united in trying to improve conditions in the rivers?
We've got a couple of people who are anglers, and I picked up quite a lot of the early information from the Cotswold fly fishers. They're very supportive. Angling groups that haven't been successful in the past. We've done this by being inclusive. It's in everybody's interest to do it, whether you fish, whether you just want kids to paddle in the river, or just walk by, or just live somewhere where there's a naturally beautiful thing that should exist. Anglers can be very apathetic about it. If they can't catch anything, the tendency has been just go somewhere else, and they've moved on to the lakes and often fished the lakes and neglected the rivers. There were quite a few anglers, and there are some who are very. Matt Hayes, he does a bit of. He's a kind of a celeb angler. He does quite a lot of campaigning as well. But considering how many there are, they've been a pretty apathetic voice in general. And I speak as a former angler, and yeah, that's the reality of it.
Yes, Sally.
Sally, are you?
Yeah. I just wondered whether you've had any luck with talking to farmers, or is really the pollution, I mean, the phosphates that you measure, a lot of them will come from farmers, but are you focusing on the sewage because that's the main thing?
Right. Well, we focused on sewage because we had a look at it, and we looked in the Windrush Valley. There's no intensive farming. It's generally there's a lot of organic farming. The farmers every farmer we've spoken to has been very supportive. Farmers are on a tight budget. They don't throw phosphate in rivers because they have to buy it.
Yeah.
And they're blamed for the nitrate pollution, as in nitrate runoff. They may have been overzealous with nitrate in the past. And there's a fair amount in groundwater, possibly because of agricultural activity. Hard to tell. But what we do know is that sewage treatment works turn ammonia into. They're supposed to turn ammonia into nitrogen. but they don't. They stop short and they turn it into nitrate. So it goes through ammonia to nitrite to nitrate. Should go to nitrogen, the gas. It doesn't. It stops at nitrate because that's cheaper. There's an easy way for them to continue. And so, for example, at Carton Sewage Works, above the outfall, I'm getting around about 10 milligrams per litre of nitrate. That will sound high to some of you that have been talking to Soraya, and the nitrate levels. It's actually relatively low, 10 milligrams per litre. That out of the sewage works, you'll be getting about 100 milligrams per litre in that liquid. And below it, therefore, you're finding about 50. Down below Bampton Sewage Works last year or the year before, when it was quite dry and the dilution was poor from the main river, I was getting 90 milligrams per litre in the river below the sewage works. 90. That's just way off. I wouldn't. Earthwatch won't even register that as a thing because it's way too high for their equipment. So there's a lot of myths kicking around. We've got lots of evidence about farm pollution, and I'm sure, I think in terms of chucking around chemicals that kill things, they are quite blameworthy in many cases. You know, Agent Orange killing the fields and all the insect life and everything else in those fields. Frankly, it's not a herbicide, is it? It's killing everything. But in terms of the fertilizers, and we get even this with the River Wye story, you don't get the actual evidence of it. You don't see evidence of it being transmitted from the land into the rivers very clearly. Sometimes, but a lot of the runoff that we see, we measure that, and we're not getting levels in that. But it must be happening. But the hard evidence on the River Wye as well is Hereford sewage works, loads of sewage works into the River Wye, constantly chucking in treated effluent, and you saw what that can look like in my video. And regardless of that, unless they're phosphate stripping, they're putting phosphate in at a level of about between 4 and 10 milligrams per litre, which is, if it's a heavy duty, big sewage works with treating a lot of people, that can be a lot of litres per second. Whitney, for example, is licensed for, at the moment, 240 litres per second. And we'll be treating 290, commonly treating 290 litres per second. That's a fair amount of bottles of mineral water that you're trying to empty into a spot. To think how much that is. That's a significant stream coming out and joining a watercourse in quite heavily polluted state.
I think on the Ock we do have arable farming.
Yeah,
and we did have one of my friends, Paul Caldwell, with
right,
a £40,000 fine about 10 years ago.
yeah,
and well publicised as well. It's not a nice thing for the farmer to find himself in the local paper.
What did happen there? I remember that. Didn't he tip over a trailer with something on it?
I can't remember.
I thought he tipped over a trailer of
it was an accident, was it?
Weed killer or something, rather than it being any kind of agricultural practice. It was a bit of a thing that he got into a lot of trouble for. Mostly the water companies don't even get investigated for theirs. And the arable farming, they should stop it with a good distance between that and the river. Quite often I've seen them go right up to the margin to try and eke out a bit of extra crop, but that depends on the person. And when we have found something, the farmers we've dealt with, we've been on it straight away and fixed it. You know, at their own expense, whatever it was. A bit of water running down through a pond where there were a lot of geese, and I think the odd pig wandered in it, and it was bringing out a bit of ammonia. They just diverted it to settle it somewhere else, and it settled out and moved things around a bit. With, you know, these are not struggling Welsh hill farmers. These are wealthy Cotswold farmers that can afford to do stuff, but they're willing and able.
Any more hands up? There's some people I can't see, so I can't see if you've got a hand up.
Ian C's got a hand up.
Has he? Ian? Can't see it, but I'll trust you, Ash. Ian? Oh
no, sorry, it's not him. It's my. I've got a hand here, a remote hand, and it's where it happened to land. Apologies.
Well, if there aren't any hands up, I just want to remind. Well, first of all, Ash, thank you very much. You're a scary person. You know, it's not what you know; it's your experience, like what you just described, about the farmers and about the sewage operators. You know, that's just experience. Because if you come to this new, You think the farmers are guilty, as guilty?
Yeah, there are places, you know, I don't want to generalize there. There will be places, I mean, some of those big agricultural firms, exactly the same, shareholder driven, same as the water industry. They'll do whatever it takes in terms of animal mistreatment, pollution. They don't care, do they? All they want is the bottom line sorted out. Family farmers that have been working around the river for many, many years, they're much more sophisticated now with their deployment of their fertilizers. They do it with satellite aid to their placement of it. They know exactly how much to add to the soil because of the way they test it. Yet the rivers have got worse in the time that agricultural practice has got better around here. And we know the other feature is, so that's why we went for Windrush against sewage pollution. We made that early judgment call that would be the one to go for, and so it turns out to be in many, many places. But I don't, you know, I'm not saying that it's always water companies. There are good and bad water companies and good and bad sewage works, and across the whole polluting range. One thing that we do that is in common with everything that could be fixed is that when pollution is profitable, it will happen, and that's what has to be changed. And that's where you come to political pressure. This is why it has to be a voting issue. That's why writing to your MP to say, what is your party actually really doing for this? When I'm thinking about voting, who to vote for, that's an important thing to do. And I don't even have to write something fancy in a letter, just put it in the heading, because chances are they won't read your letter anyway, and they probably won't reply to it. But if they see enough of those, they start to get twitchy about it. It gets up there with broadband and traffic on the A40. It's a voting issue that you need to hit that button.
Sally?
Yeah, actually, more or less answered my question. I was going to say, if there are things that the water companies can do, what's stopping them doing it, and which are the best ways that we can sort of, you know, remove those blockages, if you like? What, in your experience, is writing to our MPs the best thing we can do? What else is there?
It's a valuable thing, and to your councillors as well. You saw a number of councillors, a lot of them who campaigned hard on sewage pollution, got elected because people care about it. And I think making that impression on them that is important to you is a useful tool. Water companies do what they do because that's how they make money. They make money by being able to break the law. The government policy allows them to get away with most pollution, so that they're only prosecuted for a tiny fraction of the most serious offences. So there aren't that many real big fish kills. That's not that normal. It's much more normal for chronic pollution or sporadic acute pollution to have a very cumulative effect and gradually destroy a river, rather than the fish going belly up. And they only do prosecute the belly up fish situations, generally speaking, and they take 5 years to do it. So it's of no real meaning to water companies. Thames Water got fined £20 million in 2017. That was for 4 years of pollution around 2014. And I calculated the money they made in those 4 years meant that £20 million represented 2.4% of the money they made, which was like processing the deal through PayPal. Therefore, despite all the bleating about, oh, that'll teach them a lesson, the only lesson it taught them was that they made exactly the right financial decision to continue polluting, not investing. And that's what they've continued to do ever since. And so have all the water companies. So it's fixable, but government chosen to protect the shareholders. They're frightened of what will happen if the shareholders no longer want to participate, in the misapprehension that those shareholders have brought money into the business. They haven't. The money that's come into the business has been your money, bill payers' money, and the shareholders have never brought anything in apart from to buy a ticket, as in the ownership of those companies, to then milk the bill payer, which they'll get back that ticket when they sell their stake. That will be hard for many of you to believe that can be that bad. And we'll be putting out some more media on that, but there's already reports out from the likes of Professor Dieter Helm and David Hall, Professor David Hall from Greenwich University as well, that will tell you that there has never been any money. I had this conversation with the chief executive of Thames Water when she spoke about bringing £2 billion in to Thames Water last year. And I said, is that money, when does the last time you did this? And she said, we don't think it's ever happened in the existence of the company. They've never brought money in to be spent. And they never brought that money in either. At the time, we said, that's just money, flash money to keep your credit rating up. And sure enough, that was all it was for. They never spend money. They spend our money and then they take our money. So there is nothing to be feared by a government moving into some non-profit ownership, public ownership. We're not saying nationalisation because that's a kind of a dirty, tainted word, but modern public ownership or mutualisation, even something that takes the profit motive out of it, so that you haven't got clever financial engineers just ripping off the public, which is what we've got now. And we're trying to get that message across to whatever government might come in, Conservative, Labour, Alliance, or whatever.
Ash,
So,
you've
that's it.
given us an hour of your time. It's very
Pleasure.
kind of you. As I say, you're a scary person to us. I don't know what you're like to the water authorities. You know an awful lot. We've now got a resource on our website, or the Carbon Cutters website. It could be on ours as well. That other people who aren't here can share. And of course, it leads into lots of other sources of information, which is going to be really important when we get into this. So anybody who isn't part of a measuring team, tell me or Sally. Go to the Climate Centre when it's open again, because we've got Anthony Melville's fantastic map of the bioregion, because it all fits together as a bioregion, and that's where we live. And that's what that map demonstrates. And put those dates, the 2nd, the 16th, and the 24th, in your diary to continue the water story. And I should say that the next quarter, from October, November, December, will be a just transition. And if you're looking globally and a little bit locally, water is a serious issue in terms of equity. So water is going to be a theme as long as we've got a climate emergency centre going, I think. So thanks again, Ash. That's terrific.
Pleasure.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. And the Climate Centre is open on Sunday for a sort of reconvening party, the lift having been fitted. Sorry, Ash, we've had a lift problem, so we've been closed for 3 weeks.
Ah.
So good night, everybody, and see you next time.
Good night. Thank you.
Right.
Bye-bye.